I love football.
Desire, hungry, and a lot of times I use the word horny to my players.
Because I said, when we make clean sheet, I pay to everybody a pizza.
No, you have to make a decision in relation to that, because I need to know from you what is the most important thing, if it is to play well or if it is to win matches.
We've shown wonderful character this week.
Back of the net.
That is the name of the podcast, Back of the Net. Ron here with you. And this is Postable Sports' new football magazine show covering men's football around Europe and around the world. Plenty of football to happen in 2024, but on this episode, we are going to be taking a look back on 2023 and some of the big talking points. We have James Fenton on, an old Postable Sport friend. James, I know we know each other through League of Ireland, but we're kind of taking a broader brush of things, looking at football. Mainly around Europe. We could say it's around the world, but it's pretty much around Europe. Just a disclaimer, we don't know who the best team in the world is at the moment because we are recording this before the Club World Cup final. So we won't know that. So sorry about that. But how did you enjoy the year?
Yeah. Hi, thanks for having me on. Yeah, good as always, I guess. The old Champions League knockout stage, I don't think was stuck in the memory too well from last season, but there's a bit of drama in the group stage this time around, and a couple of title races went to the wire around Europe at the end of last season. So yeah, it's been good.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's obviously it seemed a bit inevitable that Man City were going to win the Champions League. If we want to start there, I remember one side of the draw was basically the Serie A Invitational. It was AC Milan, Inter, Napoli, and I think Benfica or something. But then the other side was the heavy hitters. It just seemed like it was, once we got to City, Inter, in fairness, Inter absolutely put it up to City on the day and had Lautaro Martinez or Romelu Lukaku had their shooting boots on. They could have equalised and even got a winner, but it just seemed a bit inevitable at one stage that City were going to win the Champions League.
Yeah. The thing with Lukaku, he's obviously been prolific over the last decade or so, I guess. But when the spotlight's really shining on him, whether it's Champions League final or Belgium at the World Cup, he has a habit of missing these really big chances, and that doesn't really reflect his ability overall. But before that, City, they got by Leipzig in the round of 16. Is it 8-1 in aggregate, and then kind of the tough games came along with Bayern Munich in the quarterfinal, and they dispatched them pretty easily, and then they beat Real Madrid 5-1 in aggregate in the semi-final. So a pretty stress-free route through the competition for Man City fans. And although they won the treble, it did sort of lack the drama of their neighbours and rivals of 1999, I think.
Yeah, well, I suppose looking back at that Man United and 99 treble, you had like one of the most dramatic Champions League finals of all time. You had the title race going down to the wire. You had the FA Cup. It wasn't a foregone conclusion, but everything it just seemed like it wasn't even a case of will City win something this year. It was a case of it was like, will they also win the FA Cup along with the league and the Champions League? In a way, that FA Cup was kind of the biggest one because it was the most hard to predict one because it was a derby in the final, but they won it handy enough in the end. I mean, that Man United treble, that was full of drama, but this was just it was almost a bit like Barcelona that year. They won, was it 6 trophies in one season? It was like, they probably will just win everything. It was, if anything, was a bit of a disappointment that they didn't win the League Cup because they were the most well-resourced team on the planet.
Yeah. I think there's kind of been an industry about Man United's 1999 in terms of books and documentaries and movies about the whole journey. And I'm not sure if Man City's journey this year will fill up as many pages. But obviously you have to give them credit for becoming such a good team to be able to get through without too much hassle and to be a stubborn Inter Milan side which is filled with a lot of talent in itself on the day.
I think one big thing, the big test was Kevin De Bruyne goes off. You're thinking it's 0-0. They were favourites to beat Chelsea in the Champions League final a few years ago. They didn't. They've never won it before. So it was that kind of mental test. So even though it was they were favourites to win all three competitions. They still had to go and win them in the end. So in that
Yeah.
sense, Pep Guardiola kind of got over the hump of never having won the Champions League without Messi.
Yeah. No, definitely. To lose to De Bruyne in those circumstances again in the Champions League final, like, it wasn't ideal, and the players' heads could have dropped. But led by the likes of Rodri and even Edison in goal and kind of that spine of the team, Kyle Walker. They kept their heads, and Inter Milan had chance of their own, and Man City kept them out, and they managed to pull through, and that's down to the mental fortitude that I suppose Pep has instilled in them since he took over.
And this is the last season where we're actually going to have a group stage in the traditional sense, I suppose, where we're going to have groups of four. Looking at it was there was enough drama this group stage. In fairness, most of the groups weren't foregone conclusions. I mean, going into the last two rounds anyway, like we there was kind of a sense of inevitability about some teams. But like, we knew Bayern Munich were getting through, but in fairness, it was down to Copenhagen or Galatasaray. I know you want to talk about Man United. Well, I feel like I should just ask how you are as a Man United fan. How are you? not to be Holly Willoughby, what's her name about it, but how are you?
It's you kind of you accept these things at this point. I think just a dramatic football club on and off the pitch is always something, and this year's Champions League campaign has certainly gone down that road. Like, was it Karen Early said the second captain said they deserved an Emmy for the TV they provided over the 6 games. Every game they had twists and turns, even though they only ended up winning 1 and drawing 1 and losing 4. But at various points they could have won 3 or 4 of those games, and they kind of blew it. And it's just in keeping with United's European record since Ferguson left. That's a few failed group stage attempts now. That when they're in the Champions League, when they're not in the Champions League, they're in the Europa League, if evens, and that sometimes doesn't even go much better. So I don't think it was a surprise. And even if they got through to the knockout stage, it would have just been delaying the inevitable, because they probably would have got a hammering by whoever they drew in the next round.
Yeah, indeed. And looking at, in fairness, they didn't go trophyless this season. They did win the League Cup. There you go. And
Yeah.
they beat my team, Charlton Athletic, in the quarterfinals. So
That's right.
I feel like I feel like in that sense you could say Man
Yeah.
United are probably better than Charlton Athletic.
Yeah, just about, maybe. Yeah.
Better than an upper mid table
Yeah.
League One team at this stage.
Yeah, you would have to say that, I suppose. But since the League Cup win, it seems that's when it seemed to all go downhill. So I wouldn't know. Maybe you could compare it to Charlton now. People kind of forget that the 7 days after the League Cup victory at Wembley, United lost 7-0 to Liverpool, and that's when it all kind of fell apart. So maybe they would have been better off not lifting that trophy.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's kind of what do you want as a football fan? Do you want a trophy, but then the rest of the year is terrible, or do you want just a fairly good year but no trophies?
Yeah, I guess. Well, for me, at the end of the day, it's all about the trophies, isn't it? They're not going to win the Champions League. They're probably not going to win the Premier League. So you kind of have to take these pots and pans when they come along.
League Cup's a decent trophy. I mean, League Cup's a decent trophy. It's a nice trophy.
No disrespect to the League Cup at
Yeah.
all. I actually think it's probably better than the FA Cup. It's probably harder to win.
Yep.
And it's provided a lot more entertainment over the years as well. And it doesn't compete with the league and the latter stages of the Champions League, at the end of the season. So it has its own nice little slot there in February where the final is.
Yeah, it's nice. It's not at a nice time as well, because it's
Yeah.
not. It's like the FA Cup can be a bit of a slog and games popping up for no reason. It probably makes sense to have cup games midweek like they do on the continent.
Definitely.
Yeah, you mentioned second captains. I was going to say big fan of second captains. Shout out to them. But in fairness, if you're listening to this podcast, if you've heard of us, you've probably heard of second captains. So I don't think I don't think we need to plug second captains. I think you probably, if you know who Postable Sport are, you know who second captains are. But I will say the new Champions League format. So basically, the way it's going to work is one big table of 36 teams. You play 8 games, so 2 more, 4 home, 4 away. As far as I know, you don't play the same team twice. It's 8 different teams, and the draw will be the fixtures will be seeded. So basically, you play two bigger teams, I suppose, than you would have in the group stage.
Yeah.
And then the top 8 go through to the last 16. Teams ranked 9 to 24th go into a playoff round, and the winners of that go into the last 16. There is no drop down into the Europa League, and similarly, I believe there's no drop down from the Europa League into the Europa Conference League now. That's something I'm not a big fan of. I'm not kind of a big fan of the whole thing in general, but that's something that not a big fan of. What are you feeling about the new Champions League format that Man United probably won't be in anyway?
Yeah. When you hear about these new formats, there, the natural reaction is to kind of go, hand on head and go, oh, why are they trying to fix what's not broken? But as I was watching a lot of the group stage this year, I was kind of thinking, it has kind of been going this way for 30 years, and maybe it, now and again a change is welcome. I'm not sure how exciting it will be next year, but I think just the fact that it's new, we'll probably have people tuning in out of curiosity. Obviously a bit longer. I think the group goes past Christmas even. It might go on to January or February. Not 100% sure. But yeah, I'm not sure will there be too much more drama, but I don't know, by the new format, would you think the bigger clubs will end up playing each other more regularly or not so much?
Well, as far as I know, because you have 8 fixtures, so if there are 4 tiers, you're essentially playing 2 teams from each tier.
Yeah.
So it seems like the idea was, say, Bayern Munich, PSG, Barcelona. Well, we don't know if Barcelona and Real Madrid are going to be in it, but the kind of higher ranked teams, if you want to call them, the traditional bigger teams, they will have bigger games in the group stage. They'll still be playing the weaker teams as well. They'll still be playing teams that have to go through the qualifiers. Interesting.
Yeah.
One thing I really don't like is as well. There's 4 extra slots. Some of them are going to extra qualifier slots, but as well as that, it's just 2 of the top 2 high ranked leagues. So, say for example, the English Premier League and La Liga in Spain will have an extra slot. I don't know if you should be qualifying automatically for the Champions League for finishing 5th in a league just because the teams above you have done well.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I know Man United and Newcastle did their best to stop their own rivals getting that 5th spot with their performance in the group stage. But yeah, even if 5 teams out of a 20-team Premier League, that's a quarter of the teams getting to the Champions League. It seems a little bit excessive, but then again, that's what they want. They want more teams, more of these teams in the Champions League, I guess. So hard to know.
Like even if it was going into the qualifiers, I could
Yeah.
probably accept that. It's just I'm not a fan of, as it is, 4th place teams in the league going automatically into the group stage. Like, one thing I'd like to see in European football in general is the winner of each league gets at least a guaranteed place in the Conference League. But that's one thing I'd like to see made into it. So in theory, how that would work is every team goes into what is basically now the 3rd round of the Champions League. Every champion goes into what is now the 3rd round Champions League qualifiers. Get knocked out, you go into the playoffs, the Europa League. You get knocked out, you're in the group stage. Europa, or in the Europa League, you get knocked out, you in the group stage of the Conference League. That would be something I'd like to see for more kind of evenly spreading out the reward. Like I just wonder, like, is it kind of going to become inevitable that we see the same teams? We're not going to see too many shocks when the top 24 teams basically qualify to the knockout rounds. We know the big we know the big teams are going to get out of the group.
Exactly. Yeah. Does seem like it won't. A lot of it will be just as predictable as the current group stage. So it's hard to know. But that's an interesting one about champions going straight to the Conference League, because it feels like you should have some kind of award rather than just going through the Champions League qualifiers and the Europa League qualifiers. And for the likes of the League of Ireland, the champions usually end up getting knocked out before they end up in the Conference League group. So it would be good to see them just have a guaranteed spot in the Conference League.
Well, I mean, like we've seen what you could call smaller leagues grow, like Kosovo. In fact, the winners of the Liechtenstein Cup, because they don't have a league, Badus got into the Conference League I think last season. So
Yeah,
like we do see teams making progress, but it's just like
yeah,
it's not about giving teams handouts. I wouldn't be wanting all 54 leagues to have a place in the
yeah,
Champions League necessarily, but it's just about
yeah,
having a bit more of a reward for winning your league.
yeah,
Um, yeah, but it's gonna be it just seems to me like it's gonna be a bit of a slog. Like I kind of get the idea of bigger groups and having bigger games in the group stage because there are, and it's the same in rugby in the European Cup. There are games that just seem like a bit of a procession. But
yeah,
I don't know about this new playoff round in the middle of it because that just means like say Bayern Munich have a few bad results and finish ninth or 10th. They're not.
yeah,
They're definitely going to win their playoff round game and get into the
yeah.
last 16. Say a team has a bad game and finishes beyond the top 16, they're going to win their playoff and get into their into like we're not going to have the same surprises. It just feels there was the year that obviously had to be restructured through unfortunate circumstances in 2020 due to the
Mm,
COVID pandemic. It was a very exciting one because it was just the quarterfinals to the final were one-off games held in
yeah,
Lisbon, held in one city. I was kind of just really excited. I don't think big teams would want that because there's more chance of an upset. But like
yeah,
now, it just seems like we're inevitably going to end up with only the big teams in the end
yeah,
who have the squad depth. So it seems
yeah,
like at this stage, qualifying for the Champions League will just be a victory for the small teams.
definitely. Um, that will be seen as quite a success for them. I remember the 2020 competition was in Leon beat Man City. I think
Was
it was
it?
Leon in the quarterfinal. And they were really exciting those games, even though they were played out in empty stadiums, but they were good TV. And I'm generally not a fan of two-legged ties in general. Like, I after I watch the first leg, I want to know the result. You know what I mean? So I think there could be more of that. Maybe if they're going to do any more reforms.
Yeah. I mean, I like that is something that kind of captured my imagination. Where obviously we hope that there's not another pandemic and it doesn't become necessary,
Yeah,
but that kind of playing the quarterfinals, semifinals, final as kind of a mini tournament at the end of
yeah,
the league, at the end of
yeah,
the league season, that was something I really enjoyed. And like, if you're going to expand the group stage and have essentially qualifiers for the knockout, because it does have that kind of European World Cup qualifier feel to it, it's a very big group.
yeah,
I'd be up for that, but then just to add that sense of unpredictability, have that kind of like it was. I remember Atalanta doing quite well. I
mm,
remember Red Bull FC
Lewandowski.
doing quite well.
Uh-huh.
So it just and then Bayern were ultimately the best team in Europe that year. They went on and won, and they won the treble. We'll see what happens with that. Who are your pick to win the final Champions League of the current format then?
Of this current one, it's hard to look past, I suppose, City again and Real Madrid, who looked like they were cooking something good there in the group stage. Led by Jude Bellingham, the next superstar of English football. Bayern Munich, you never write them off, especially with another English superstar up front. Um, I would say City will probably be favourites, and if anyone's going to stop them, it'll be Real, um, and potentially Bayern, I guess. Dortmund were looking okay, but they're obviously shaky in the Bundesliga, and I think they're probably going to be changing their managers soon. Um, you know, um, Barcelona would have been one of the favourites, but many moons ago, but not so much anymore. They're just so inconsistent. So I would say City or Real Madrid maybe at a push.
Yeah. You mentioned Dortmund there, the Bundesliga final
Mm.
day. I was commentating on a Women's League of Ireland Premier Division match, but I was keeping an eye on it. I mean, how Dortmund conspired not to win the league that day was remarkable because it just had that feel of what year was the Aguero in the English
Oh,
Premier League. It just had that kind of feel of this crazy game that it just came down to
yeah,
it was just like both Dortmund and Bayern were trying not to lose the game. And in fairness,
yeah,
despite the last 11 seasons being won by Bayern, they're not top of the Bundesliga this season for the first time in 4 years. I think they haven't been top at the Christmas break.
yeah, yeah. So that last day of the Bundesliga, I think everyone was tuning into that to see could Dortmund kick on and get their hands on the trophy. It's actually so rare in like the league format across Europe that there is a title up for grabs in the final day. Normally it's settled, a couple of weeks beforehand. So yeah, with Dortmund had it all in their hands, and they managed how they managed to blow it was kind of admirable in a way, especially because I think most neutrals were cheering them on because nobody wants to see our team win 10, 11 leagues in a row. So, will they have another chance again this year? It doesn't look like it. Bayer Leverkusen should be in the mix towards the end, so it could be a decent enough Bundesliga finish again.
Yeah, Bayer Leverkusen are playing a good, exciting brand of football. Florian Ritz is definitely a player to keep an eye on the Euros. Germany at home. Germany have obviously been very patchy in both the men's and the women's football, and we'll chat a bit about women's football later on. But they just have a lot of good young players. Like, that's one thing I love about the Bundesliga. They're good at developing and growing players. Like we saw, obviously Erling Haaland is in Germany, but he came through in Germany. You look at Jude Bellingham, obviously homegrown in Birmingham. His number is retired, but he really developed in Dortmund. They're just a good place developing players. But it's strange when, like, there's been a lot of high-profile signings in the English Premier League from the Bundesliga. Like, you look at Timo Werner, Kai Havertz, they were both doing very well in the Bundesliga when they signed over. There's like, it just never seems to work out. I don't know, is that because it's a different type of football? I don't know, is that because of the pressure, because there's more eyes on you, or is it just sometimes players aren't suitable to clubs or types of football?
I think it's a mix of it all, really. A lot of the times they're not suited. Like the Havertz and Werner, they went to Chelsea, and did Lampard want them in at the time? Who knows? Another one is Sancho, who obviously came through at Dortmund as well. In a way, was developed there, came back to England, and look at that's gone at Man United. I would say the standard. Some of them struggle with the standard, I guess, the pace of the game. Even though the Bundesliga isn't without its, out its charms, but it's a difficult league as well. But I think it's a step above in the Premier League, and yeah, like you said, so many of them have kind of failed to bring their form over, except for the likes of Haaland, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true. Haaland is I think Haaland is going to be the next exception to kind of every rule in football at the moment.
Yeah.
Looking at we may as well stick with the Premier League while we're on it. We have a bit of a title race on our hands. I think we have to talk about Aston Villa. I mean, they've had a good calendar year, and they've had a good start to the season. Unai Emery. I mean, was Steven Gerrard just a really bad manager, or is Unai Emery just a really good manager? What's going on?
I think you hit the nail on the head with both there. I think Gerrard was so unsuited to that Villa team. I think he won the League of Rangers, and kind of up in Scotland, and kind of had a higher opinion of himself than he should have. It was quite clear that he was falling out with the players towards the end there. Threw a few of them under the bus in interviews. Made a kind of unnecessary story out of the captaincy. Taking it from Mings to begin. Didn't really have to announce it the way he did. And then Emery came in, and it's just been a breath of fresh air. Players obviously were relieved to see Gerrard go, and they've taken to this new manager who has proven himself for many years in Europe. The Arsenal era, the Arsenal period for Emery was obviously an exception. Came in after the Wenger era, came in to replace Wenger, and there was a lot of transition at that time. This fella's won, I think it's 5 Europa Leagues, and lost one final as well, or it could be 4, but definitely a lot of Europa Leagues. And whatever you say about the Europa League, to win that many and to get to the finals basically any time he's been in it is pretty incredible. And are they are Aston Villa title contenders? I'd say it's probably a little bit early to say that, but look at the points tally in the Premier League at the moment. They definitely are well placed for a Champions League finish. That's whether it's 4th place or 5th place. They're 5 points ahead of 5th place. So just keep knocking those wins, keep knocking out those wins, and they should make it. And that would be seen as a huge success.
Yeah, it would be. And I mean, this is an Aston Villa side that was relegated not too long ago. In fairness, it is a pretty decent side. Like, it's a decent team, but they are definitely punching above their weight. Another team that punched above their weight was Brighton, obviously with the best striker in the world, Evan Ferguson.
Yeah.
They managed to get into Europe. Europe wasn't smooth for them, but they've gotten out of the group now. I mean, if you're a team like Brighton, like I think about it as a Charlton Athletic supporter, there was a time back in the more than 15 years ago when we were in the Premier League. We were
Mm.
nearly getting into Europe, and I think there was frustration. Come on, can we not just push on a little bit ahead? If I was a Brighton fan, I'd be delighted with this. I'd be delighted with where they are at the moment because,
Yeah.
like, even if they could just keep ticking over, gradually competing for Europe, getting into Europe, do decent in the Europa League. I mean, like we saw Burnley get into Europe and then they get relegated a few seasons later. Saw it with
Yeah.
Swansea. Getting into Europe once kind of it can make
Yeah.
fans kind of get carried away and think, right, we should be in the Champions League. Keeping it ticking over,
Yeah.
doing well in the league and getting consistently into Europe, that's pretty good. And like you see where West
Definitely.
Ham are now, they're
Yeah.
probably a contender for the Europa League, having won the Europa Conference League last season. But
Yeah.
it's just consistent European football is better than doing really well, doing a Leicester City, doing really well. Well, you probably would
Mm.
take a Leicester City maybe, but doing really well once and then just
I
spending
know
all
what
the
you mean.
money on players that don't suit and then falling apart.
Yeah. All these clubs seem to have their little rise and then a very quick fall, but Brighton have sort of sustained it for a couple of years now, and West Ham obviously, who are traditionally a bigger club than Brighton. They've been knocking around the top half of the Premier League. West Ham, that is, for the last 3 or 4 years, while reaching the Europa League semi-finals and then winning the Conference League. Um, and then they look in good shape to go far in the Europa League again this year. Brighton, obviously, like you said, I think it was a rough enough start in Europe, and they've managed to pull off some famous wins against Ajax and Marseille, and top that group. And now they skipped the playoff round. Um, so yeah, if I was a fan of Brighton, I'd be very happy at how things are, despite maybe they've flatlined a little bit. Where results haven't been amazing in the Premier League recently, and there's a lot of clubs hoping to get those European spots this year. So they need to kind of improve a little bit and maybe hold on to the Derby and yeah, but they will want to consistently qualify for the Europa League and maybe even the new Champions League.
I think that's a big one, holding on to the Zerbi and holding on to whoever does their scouting because they're
Yeah,
really good at finding players. I mean, they're one of these teams, and we're going to talk about
yeah,
another team in a little while who's good at that, but they're one of these teams who just manages to find these stars from out of nowhere.
100%. They've kind of taken over from Leicester in that sense. Leicester back when before they won the league, and then those kind of years after they won the league, they're digging up the likes of Kante, Mahrez, these players that went on to become superstars and then sold on for much more money. Even Danny Drinkwater, they made how much profit of him selling to Chelsea. But yeah, Brighton are now the ones that are finding these gems and cutting them and then obviously that's part of their model, sell them on for massive profits, but while also having replacements, the likes of Evan Ferguson in there, and I know Lee Kavanagh has come through the Bray Wanderers Academy. He's been on the Brighton bench a lot recently, and looks like a debut is just around the corner for him. Um, you know, are these Irish guys gonna be sold for hundreds of millions with Ferguson? You wouldn't say no, and they'll probably have a replacement lined up for him.
Yeah, well, hopefully they keep, from our point of view, hopefully they keep producing Irish stars anyway. That would be great.
Yeah.
But looking at the Premier League, then obviously one big talking point was Everton's big point deduction.
Mm.
I mean, it might be the best thing that happened to them because they're suddenly on European qualification form. I mean, I think if you added the 10 points, they would be in a European place. So it seems to have galvanized them. And a Sean Dyche team, us against the world, backs against the world wall. It might be the best thing for them. So Everton do a Leicester City next year.
Yeah, well, you never know. They are. They think they've got 4 wins on the bounce in the Premier League now. Obviously a tough result there in the cup midweek. But yeah, they seem to have taken those 10 points and used it as a kind of siege to form a siege mentality. And yeah, they should be up in 10th, I think, on 26 points, but they only have 16. There's even with the deduction, they're 7 points clear of Luton. So you would say just throw a few more wins together in the new year, and they should be okay.
Yeah. Looking elsewhere in Europe, then, so Barcelona win the La Liga, Napoli win Serie A, and PSG seemingly inevitably win the French league. We'll talk a bit about PSG. I mean, they've kind of changed their model up because they were. It seemed like in the build up to Qatar hosting the World Cup, it was all about stars, sign Messi, sign Neymar, sign Ibrahimovic, and now they seem to actually be going for younger players. Obviously, built a lot around Mbappe, but they seem to be going for these younger players, the likes of Nuno Mendes, the Kolo Muani. They they go for players with potential who they can actually develop rather than ready-made stars. I mean, it seems like with PSG, it's one of these. It's only a success if they win the Champions League because I
Mm.
mean, if anything, they've failed to win the league 2 or 3 times. Is the narrative I'd be looking at in the last decade.
Yeah, definitely. The model has completely changed. You're right. They've got most of the superstars out the door. Mbappe is kind of the only kind of major one left. There's some up and coming guys, the ones you mentioned. Lee Kang-in is the South Korean winger he's impressed me as well. But yeah, when you stick a PSG game on RTE or whatever on Champions League night and it has the starting 11, some of them you're kind of like, oh, not too familiar with this guy, which is completely different to what it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago when 1 to 11 seemed to be a world superstar. So but like, is it working for them? Not amazingly. They struggled through the group and they're not doing hugely better in France. But yeah, obviously that's the model they're going for this season. It remains to be seen what happens with Mbappe. You'd imagine he'll be out the door in the next year or two. So what they do with the money for him will be interesting to see.
And over in Spain, Barcelona, they were having that bit of a resurgence last season. Girona, who we should mention are owned by the same people Man City own, but they're not really the big money club Man City are. I mean, they don't exactly have a lot of big name players. Girona and Real Madrid, it seems to be, for the La Liga title. And Portugal had quite an exciting title race and is having another one this year with the traditional big three, along with Braga, who are kind of next in line but have never won the league. It would be good for Portuguese football, I'd imagine, if Braga won the league, because if you have a situation where only I think it's only 1 or 2 teams outside of Sporting, Benfica, and Porto have won the Portuguese league since it began. So it would be good for Portuguese football to have a new name in the trophy.
100%. Yeah, it's basically been the big three the whole way through. Just just gonna have to just having a little look here to see when's the last time. I think it was a Braga themselves and sorry, Boa Vista in
Boa Vista, yeah.
2001. Yeah, it was the last time Sporting, Porto, or Benfica didn't win it. Yeah, it's looking like another exciting title race in Portugal with the big three over there. Sporting got a big result against Porto the other day, and they sit the top. They sit at the top. Braga are involved as well. There's a couple of points behind. So yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting one, I think. As for Spain, yeah, Barcelona. It doesn't look like they're going to be involved in a title race this year, and Xavi seems to be under a lot of pressure there as manager. Girona are owned by the City Group, like you said. So I think Guardiola's brother is involved there. How much backing are City giving them? Yes, you don't really know, but they're only 3 points ahead of Real Madrid, to be fair, and they've played 18 games. Can they sustain it? I guess you'd like to see it just to have another name at the top of the Spanish league.
I would wonder if City were doing better in the Premier League, like if City were clear at the top of the table, would a few players be going on loan to Girona just to give them that bit of squad depth,
Just to see it
just to
through,
the end
yeah.
of the season? That kind of the kind of way that bit of working together, that synergy. But
Yeah,
yeah, looking at the Portuguese league, it's one of these underrated leagues where, like, Luis
yeah,
Diaz, probably a big name who came through there recently. Obviously, Casemiro came through there. Like, they do produce
yeah,
players, as does the Dutch league. We'll talk a bit about Ajax because they've kind of we were talking about Brighton producing young players. Ajax are obviously known for their youth academy. They seem to always have a next player up. Um, in recent years, so they obviously made the Europa League final, lost to Jose Mourinho's Man United. I think Mauro and Fellaini scored in that one. They missed out the Champions League final narrowly a few seasons later, and now in the last few years they've lost Frankie De Jong, Matthias de Ligt, Andre Onana. Anthony's gone to Man United. Van de Beek was doing quite well at Ajax, went to Man United, another one who just didn't work out. Like they've been consistently losing players, and it seems like it's collapsed now. And they'll probably come back in a few years' time, but it was looking dangerous earlier in the season because they were very much in the relegation zone. And they may well even miss out on any kind of European football this year.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Ajax cycle. They go through these cycles of 5-year spells in the doldrums, and then another 5 years kind of doing well in Europe and showing off their vast array of youth talent to the rest of Europe, which they end up going on to sell. I imagine there's a lot of working on behind the scenes, developing their underage teams at the minute, who probably come to prominence in the next 2 or 3 years. They managed to get a winning run together in recent weeks and months after their flirtation with the relegation zone earlier in the season. Still like a good few points behind. I think they're 8 points behind the European qualification places. But if they keep knocking out those wins, they could qualify for one of the competitions next year anyway. But it's always an interesting club to keep an eye on.
There are just clubs like that around Europe, particularly in like leagues like we mentioned, Portugal, in the Eredivisie in the Netherlands as well, and to an extent in the Bundesliga outside of Bayern Munich, who just, it seems like their role in European football is developing the next generation. Like you could argue Dortmund are kind of a super version of that because they tend to do quite well. Bayer Leverkusen, top of the German league. We know they're probably going to lose all their players in the transfer window, maybe even in January, but definitely next summer. We know they're going to see an exodus of players. Like it seems like there are just teams, they just can't hold on to their players really, because I guess it's the money, I guess it's the allure of bigger teams, bigger football. But it nearly seems like these teams are almost feeder clubs to the super teams, I guess.
Yeah, I think Dortmund and Ajax, like I said, are the two prime examples of that. Develop these young players, sell them on, and then a lot of times they look like they've robbed the teams that have paid big money, because the players haven't gone on to be huge success elsewhere, like the likes of Sancho. Even you could say De Jong at Barca, has he reached his potential? I'm not so sure. But Dortmund and Ajax, that's their model, I guess, and they seem pretty happy with it. And then every now and again, the stars will align and they'll reach a Champions League final like Dortmund did in 2013, or they'll reach a semi-final like Ajax did in 2019. So like they seem happy enough with it, and the fans seem okay with it too.
All I'm going to say is Ajax missed out on that final through a late Tottenham goal, and a few months later the COVID pandemic happened. I was going to say that. I'm not saying correlation is causation, but I'm just gonna put that one out there. Like I guess it's modern football that to be a sustainable business, to be a sustainable football club, it's probably the way it has to happen. But it would be one rule I'd love to see come into football. We see these teams with big squads. We see it here, relatively speaking, in the League of Ireland. We see some teams have more squad depth than others. I'd love to see a rule coming across the board at top level football. You have to have a whatever percentage. I don't know. There's people who can come up with a better number than me. But if you have a squad, say there's 30 players in your squad, 10 of them have to come through your youth academy or have had to be signed with you for I don't know, more than 4 or 5 years. Like I'd like to see a sense of you actually have to develop players. I feel like it would give a team a bit more identity, and it would actually make teams invest in their own academies. Because you look at like Man City are a prime example. They had Joe Hart for a while who was doing well, Phil Foden. Aside from that, Cole Palmer, who was left now. Like they're kind of the only players they actually really produced. Like everyone else was just bought in. And, it's something Man United used to do really well. They had that golden generation, obviously, that led to them so much success. But it just seems like really it's kind of with the big teams. Well, we don't need to develop any players. We don't need to. The players they develop will have decent careers in maybe the second tier or in lower leagues around Europe. But it just seems like they don't really need to develop any players because they know they can just go snap up players off these other clubs.
Yeah, exactly. Like Chelsea were famous for not having a lot of youth players during their success in the 2000s and 2010s. Like John Terry was obviously the exception. He came through the academy there, but then their model kind of changed. When Lampard came back in the transfer ban they had, the likes of Abraham, Mount, Reece James, Tomori, and then later Conor Gallagher, like they seem to have switched there, and are giving a lot of players their chances. But yeah, no, it would be good to see a rule like that. It would help with the development of a lot of young players, and you'd imagine it would help, the English national team as well.
But that's it. It would help leagues develop players for the
Yeah,
national teams. I mean, and that's
yeah.
not just England. It would help the Spanish
Oh, of
national
course
team,
not.
Germany,
Yeah,
would help national teams
yeah,
anywhere. I mean, we see it here in Ireland that like a lot of the times our national team players in the men's side of things are developed over in England
yeah,
or over in Scotland. They're not actually developed in Ireland.
yeah.
There's a few cases of players kind of developing a little bit later in the League of Ireland and getting a big move. But most of the time, they're players who were snapped up young, or they're players who maybe came through academies and were Irish qualified. Maybe
Yeah.
they were born in England or Scotland or came through academies there, and then they were Irish qualified. So it would give football associations that need to actually invest in their domestic leagues, and I think that's just a good thing. But one thing we do have to talk about, speaking of Europe and leagues, on the day we came out and we started recording this, a whole thing about the European Super League came out. So as far as at the time of recording anyway, the only teams that are actually on board with this, so UEFA have essentially came out and said we're not for it, we don't agree with it, but they can't stop it from happening. Am I right
Mm.
in saying that clubs that partake in European Super League won't be allowed partake in any other UEFA competition?
I wouldn't be 100% sure on that, but you would imagine so. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because the animosity between UEFA and those clubs seems to be pretty high at the moment. So I would imagine
What's
that would be.
interesting though is a lot of the original clubs from the original Super League in 2021,
Mm.
like some Man United, Man City, or pretty much everyone except Real Madrid and
Yeah,
Barcelona, Atletico Madrid have came out and said we're not going to take part. Man
yeah,
City came out and said it. PSG have denied it,
yeah,
denied they're going to do it. German teams, Dutch teams, Portuguese, basically everyone except Real Madrid, Barcelona, and seemingly Napoli are on board with this. So like what I'd imagine happens is, if this is the way it's going to be, is eventually it ends up becoming this kind of world league of, we see obviously a lot of movement into Saudi Arabia domestic leagues. Are they going to join up with this European Super League? Are we going to have MLS teams in this kind of ring fenced, almost
mm,
non-football league? Like, it seems almost, the WWE famously called themselves sports entertainment instead of wrestling. It seems like we're
yeah,
almost going to have that kind of football entertainment kind of thing in the
yeah,
Super League
yeah.
that's in this breakaway tournament.
Mm. Um, I mean, would anyone care if at this stage, like if Barcelona and Real Madrid, went off to play each other every week, or even if they had these Saudi clubs or MLS clubs, like you said, that's a lot of travel involved. Unless they want to base themselves in some other part of the world, which you wouldn't be too surprised about. Um, I think the likes of the Premier League clubs and Bayern Munich, like you said, and Atletico Madrid, a lot of them are the ones who were originally in the Super League plan. They were completely spooked by their fans' reaction to that news a couple of years ago, and they seem to still be spooked about it. And that's why they've released these statements so quickly. Man United, Liverpool, issued groveling apologies to their fans there a couple of years ago, as did the rest of the Premier League clubs. And it seems like not enough time has passed for them to to change their minds on that, and they would fear another backlash. Which, if you remember, that backlash led to the invasion of Old Trafford and the postponement of a game between United and Liverpool a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it was such a strange thing, because it kind of seemingly came out of nowhere just one day. By the way, we're launching the Super League. These 12 rich clubs don't have enough money, and
Yeah,
it just kind of came out of nowhere. It completely defeats the purpose of a sporting competition, just having a ring fenced league where, like, this is the thing. In theory, it does make sense to have a top tier European league with lower leagues beneath it. But at
mm,
the same time, you're thinking you can't have teams guaranteed places. You can't have, like, say you were having a tier one European league of 16 teams, and then regional leagues below that, say
yeah,
like Spain and Portugal, the UK,
Yeah.
Germany and France. In theory, something like that makes sense if every team in Europe has a chance of getting to the top
Yeah.
table. If it's not completely ring fenced, if it's not just here's the rich teams go on top. At the same time, as well, we are having a very real climate crisis, so you do have to think about travel, and how much traveling is there going to be? Would it be worth just basing it in a couple of countries? And that's something that a lot of complaints about the 2030 World Cup having 3 games in South America and then moving up
Yeah.
to Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. That's a big issue because that's a lot of travel. So
Yeah.
there is a way of making something like that work. Basically, expanding the Champions League into you're going to have a top tier
Yeah.
league with the top teams in Europe, but there's regional leagues underneath it because you think about why did football why is there like I think in Germany they originally had a bunch of regional leagues because teams couldn't afford to travel around before the formation of the Bundesliga, and then eventually they were able to combine into one league. Obviously, there was West Germany and East Germany, but like it does make sense to like have one big league at the top if teams can get in. But at the moment, this just seems like I go back to that kind of football entertainment thing. One thing that really bothers me about football coverage these days is it's gone so much about highlight reels, gone so much about just general like what came out of the Ballon d'Or ceremony when Messi won. The thing that went viral was some YouTuber overreacting to the win, and it's like
Mm.
those. It seems like football revolves more around those kind of things and clips and
Yeah.
YouTube than the actual game. And it seems like you could nearly just not have a game of football, but to have the brand of football seems to mean more than those things. I do commentary on League of Ireland Women's Premier Division games for one of the teams for their home games, who play in the USD Bowl DLR Waves. And when I'm picking a player of the match, I don't just pick a player, they scored a goal, so they must be player of the match. That
Yeah.
goalkeeper made a save, must be player of the match. Kept a clean
Mm.
sheet, the centre back gets player of the match. I tried to think about who actually had a positive impact overall in the game,
Yeah.
who was good positioning, who made
Yeah.
positive contributions, all those things. It seems
Mm.
like we're losing that in football. We're losing this actual essence of what the game is, and it's becoming more about this show and this brand. It's becoming more about this player's the goat. This player did a step
Mm.
over. Let's put together a YouTube highlight video. And it seems like it's becoming more about the idea of football rather
Yeah.
than the actual game. We're losing we're gonna lose these things like look, Greece winning Euro 2004. They didn't do it with attractive football, but it was an amazing story. We're
Yeah.
gonna lose football stories in this because it's gonna become basically skills demos as football matches.
Mm.
And like we've seen that the amount of money that's coming into it, it's maybe social media plays a role in it. It always does. It's always social media's fault. But it seems like it's becoming more about this idea of a brand around football than the actual football matches that we
Mm.
watch.
Yeah, I'd be on board with that. Just this day and age, it's all about second screens, isn't it? Your main screen's your TV, and I always wonder, with the conversations that go on about the games on the likes of Twitter or X, it's called now. It's like how many people are actually watching the game if they're just tweeting every 5 seconds, and I include myself in that. I probably don't see as much as I would have 5 years ago because I'm also looking to see what other people are saying about it. You know what I mean? In the absence of, I don't know, a group of your friends there in the pub or whatever, you just are on your sofa. But yeah, I think the whole sideshow of football, you kind of just have to sit back and laugh at it sometimes. Football is always going to be there at grassroots level, even at League of Ireland level. I think the lower leagues in England, these clubs are institutions. And aside from all the goat talk and the YouTuber, it's starting to sound about a little bit like old man yells at the cloud. But the likes of transfer gurus, I know the famous Italian guy, who's I don't know how many
Fabrizio.
followers he has. Yeah, Romano. How many followers has he got now? And his excitable tweets about goats and the price tags of these people and the wages, and it's all a bit bling bling bling, I think. Yeah. And I've seen him comment on certain footballers' posts, and it's like, is this guy just friends with some of these guys now? And kind of, it's a little bit, as long as we keep the rest of us, if these clubs and these players want to start their own stuff, as long as the rest of us try and keep the soul going, I guess, through podcasts like this.
As a post sport is the soul
Yeah,
of what's right about
yeah,
football. But that is why, and I know we are very much turning into old man yells at goat here, but like that is why things like that's why the League of Ireland is important to support, or even the non-league football in Ireland. That's why grassroots football is important to sport, because like without that, without
yeah,
the domestic leagues, the smaller leagues, without that, there's no goats. There's no. I mean,
yeah.
Messi at the end of the day came from a team in Argentina. He had to start playing football sometime. He didn't just
Exactly.
arrive.
Yeah,
He didn't just
yeah,
arrive as the best player in the world at Barcelona.
yeah.
So like this like these players had to develop somewhere, and it'd be a real shame if the Super League's got everything wrong about like you can't just have a bunch of top level players in these franchises who never had to
Yeah.
develop playing football.
Exactly, and then like flog them to death by, like, for example, this new World Club
Yeah.
tournament that's going to be held in June 2025. And it's like, surely the players they're going to need a break at some point. I know Bernardo Silva was making a lot of sense the other day, saying, that this might not be able to do it, and it's like, well, what is the point of this new tournament?
Yeah.
Just more tournaments every year.
One thing that's strange to me about that, speaking of the Club World Cup, they're still keeping a competition of continental winners, basically the Club World Cup we have now. They're still keeping something like that going while also having
Yeah,
the Club World Cup. I can get the sense of having a kind of like there's no need for a 32 team Club World Cup with teams qualifying that haven't even won their continental competition. I get the
yeah,
sense of trying to make it more marketable. I get the sense of having it in its own window and not having it in the middle of the season. Then again,
yeah,
different leagues have different seasons.
yeah,
But like just a 32 team needless Club World Cup. I think
yeah,
there are about 8 European teams qualifying, 10 even maybe. Like only 4 of them are going to be Champions League winners. There's
yeah.
just like there's just it just seems to be nonsense, and it's coming in over the
Mm,
Confederations Cup, which actually was kind of an entertaining competition.
yeah,
I mean, I remember getting to watch Tahiti play. I enjoyed that.
yeah. Yeah, the Confederations Cup was that was the year before the World Cup, right? And
Yeah,
sort of a dress rehearsal for the host nation, which made a lot of sense, and you would kind of watch the games because there weren't all these other you know pre-season club games on and on whatever TV channel it was on. Um, but yeah, needless was the word I picked up that you said there. It's what it is to me. It's what's the point of it, and what's the longevity of this new tournament? Is it going to be one of these? It takes place twice and then is never heard of again, because I think that could be the case because clubs just won't be into it.
yeah, it might be. Let's never speak of the Club World Cup again. Like again, I get the sense of having a big tournament with the continental winners, maybe 8 teams, 16 teams, straight knockout,
Yeah.
open draw.
Mm,
You don't play a team from your confederation straight away. But like just having this massive big tournament with teams that like basically qualify from being pretty good in their competition. Like
yeah.
looking at the way it is so it's for from European point of view anyway. It's 4 European qualifiers, and then like the other, I think it's 4 more European qualifiers who are like the best ranked in the
Mm,
European in the best ranked European team without having winning it. So like it's like
yeah.
why are they in it? I mean, I get having
Yeah.
like a 16 team kind of tournament, just knockout play it
Mm,
where you play it. I would like to see it a bit more spread out as well, because I don't see why UEFA need that many teams in this league where they
yeah.
like to have so many more. Like I'd,
Yeah.
I'd like I'd get the point of having like even like the last 4 Champions League winners play off, winner
Yeah. Yeah.
goes to this tournament or
Yeah.
something like that. But like it just seems nonsensical to have basically a World Cup. And that's something I feel about the new World Cup, men's World Cup format. This 48 team. I'm glad they didn't go with the groups of 3, because that would have been a disaster.
Yeah.
But like
100%.
32 teams from 48 get through to the knockout round. What's the point
Yeah.
of the group stage then? Like it's just like
Yeah. Exactly.
everyone like it's and Ireland still aren't going to qualify. But like we had the Women's World Cup over the summer. 32 for a World Cup. An international World Cup was perfect. It was very exciting. We got plenty of shocks. Got the quarterfinals pretty much were the 8 best teams. Very entertaining tournament. Obviously, lots of off the field stuff that we will talk about when we look back at the year in women's football. But like, it's like as for it as a football tournament, it worked really well. And you know, looking at it, just seems like, you know, if something's not broke, don't fix it. I mean, like it's just kind of like it's just well, it's a cash grab, I guess. But there is the Euros coming up. Now I'm going to contradict myself here, because personally for the Euros, I want to see every team in the Euros, every UEFA team, complete nonsense, chaos. 50, I think it's 54 at the moment. Russia suspended. Just every European team, open draw, all play each other. I want San Marino against Liechtenstein. There's this wrestling tournament in Japan called the G1 Climax. It's infamous for anyone can beat anyone. Just have this crazy play each other every 2 days or something. Let's just make that chaos. Let's just make that, because honestly,
you may as well just have everyone in. There's enough. I mean, it's big enough as it is, so why not just invite everyone else?
It seems like 24 is a weird number. Like, either have 16 or 32, but we don't need third place teams qualifying.
If you get to 32 in Europe, that will become, well, why don't we just ask the other teams or whatever it is?
It'd be well, we all know football peaked at the Nations League third place playoff. That's the only football game that really matters anymore. Well, James, thanks for coming on today, and Happy New Year, and enjoy your festive celebrations. Hopefully talk to you again about football in the new year.
Good man, anytime. Thank you.
Yep, thanks very much. And thank you for listening to Back in the Net episode 1. Plan is to do this on the first Tuesday of each month, to have a new episode looking at all kinds of football issues. Plenty of football to talk about in 2024. AFCON, the Asian Cup, a little bit later in the year, Euros, Copa America, and even the Oceania Cup. So we'll try to cover everything going on and have a few different interesting people on for the many talking points. And a very happy new year to you as well. And thanks very much to everyone who's interacted with us over the past number of years now at this stage, whether it's on our blog, on social media, or just by listening to our podcasts. And hopefully we'll enjoy another great year of football. And it is at postbussport on Instagram and X, and it's postbus.sport.blog is where you can find all our articles. And remember to subscribe to Postbus Sport on Spotify for every single episode of our podcast.